and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, and the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamlet and Michael Sidgwick. And gents, we are gathered here today to talk about former wrestlers returning to WWE. This, of course, on the heels of the news that John Morrison, as announced on WWE Backstage, has re-signed with WWE and could be returning anytime soon. First of all, what are your thoughts on John Morrison returning, and when would you like to see him come back, and possibly even who would you like to see him work with?
I do wish we weren't gathered here today to discuss all these things, because John Morrison is a tremendous pro wrestling athlete. He looks amazing. Those abs are absolutely to die for, even better when they've got little gems stuck to them. Like, his flips are fantastic. His hair is lovely. That entrance was brilliant. And if all of this doesn't already kind of like insincerely mask that I just don't care about his matches, then I don't know what else will. He's the type of wrestler with the best will in the world could only ever like reach a certain point. You know, there's always this glass ceiling criticism against WWE guys. He was one that was never destined to break through it. And at this point, at 40 years old, I hope that they just make the best use of him on, say, NXT or on SmackDown to really help guys that need it, young guys that aren't working with, they're only working with other young guys. The whole thing is you're supposed to work with experienced people. I hope, with all due respect to him, this is not like a pushed place he's going to be given on the roster, personally.
I disagree. I was a huge fan of John Morrison's earlier run in WWE, and I definitely think there's scope for him. I suggested on the news when we reported this that you could insert him into a title feud, not a world title feud, but I could easily see him coming in and instantly feuding with someone like a Shinsuke Nakamura. Your thoughts?
My thoughts echo Hamlet's completely. I watched John Morrison emerge as a single star at a time when, my God, I was so desperate for a change of scenery. Everything felt so oppressed by aging legends who were still like really in great form, like Taker, Michaels, and Edge, but it just felt like there was a tier of the top guys, and they used to wrestle each other every month for 2 consecutive years in the case of Triple H, Edge, and Randy Orton. And I'm following Hamlet's template here. Amid all this, when I was like, Dolph Ziggler's really great. He probably could be the new Shawn Michaels. And CM Punk's actually great. He actually could main event WrestleMania and should have. Amid all that sentiment and feeling, I looked at John Morrison, and again, no disrespect, like, I was entertained by him, and Patch, he just never do it for me. In the process of discussing, you know, where he could go, where he would best fit in, like, he can't really go on Raw because that's Ricochet's USP. He's the guy who does incredible things. They could do a mirror match.
He's a real life superhero.
Yeah. They could do like a mirror match and like do like insane athletic things against one another, and that would be all right for about 3 weeks. I don't want to see that. I think his best home, and cynically, I think he's been signed up to go to NXT just to pull the 50-year-olds who remember 10 years ago. There's no harm in that whatsoever. It's a fresh use of a guy who feels like he's done it all, or he hasn't done it all because he's not won a world title, but he's not ever going to win a world title. I would like to see, if I had any opponent in mind for John Morrison, just looking at the contrast between the performers, just looking at the way he could avoid his big finish, I'd like to see John Morrison versus Cameron Grimes, you know?
What, just so he could take that big boot in the abs? Smash his, like, beautiful abs to bits.
Yes.
See the stones fly everywhere. That's what I really like, actually.
For precisely that. I just think he could avoid that hugely impressive or over move that he does. What's called the cave-in.
Yeah, the cave-in, yeah.
Like, they could build a match around John Morrison doing mad, daft, ridiculously impressive stuff around avoiding that move. I think generally it's a bit of a new flavour to NXT.
Parkour. That's how he avoids things, isn't it? It's parkour.
Parkour.
This is going to sound like this is just a John Morrison criticism podcast when we should be celebrating a new signing and all that sort of stuff. Like, John Morrison and Kofi Kingston are quite similar wrestlers, and they came through at quite a similar time, and they appeared to be hitting a glass ceiling. Had Kingston left and Morrison stayed, do you imagine we'd have been watching Morrison Mania this year? Like, I don't think so. I think he's even less exciting than some of the classmates that he came up with, such as a Ziggler and such as a Kingston. And what he's got going for him now is a kind of a bit of a newness because there's not many from his era that have as yet come back. And I can only hope that that's what they utilise. More than anything else, that's what they utilise.
Before we get on to some former wrestlers that could return, the Miz's name has obviously been mentioned in and around John Morrison as a potential person to feud with or even reunite what was a very enjoyable tag team for me.
They were brilliant. Honestly, I stupidly bought tickets to WWE shows for acts like Miz and Morrison back around that time. They were doing online shows before WWE YouTube channel was really a thing and wrestlers were ever sort of taking gambles on the microphone. They were getting away with things on the internet. So I'd welcome that. But that basically slots me into that 50-plus demographic that Cedric just pointed out. And I've got, luckily, about 16 years before I get there. That puts me in I remember them. Can I watch a bit more of them? It's not exactly, very forward-thinking, exciting booking. It's just, oh, yeah, I liked how that looked 14 years ago. Can I have another look?
If not for Morrison's sake, God damn it, I hope that happens for The Miz. Because he's signed for 5 more years and he's been in it for ages. And I respect his ability to just not only overcome the hazing process, but in his own way to change that culture. Because he was never going to do it because he seems like a genuinely upstanding, nice bloke. But I'm bored sick of him. So this would be nice to get something out of The Miz, who has really done much and nout in recent months after a promising start of the year.
We've actually discussed before that when you've got Raw 25 or the 1000th episode or whatever celebratory show they're doing, they never revisit the likes of John Morrison's era because nobody has too much warm nostalgia for it. And yet, just thinking about the Miz and Morrison, donning their old gear. So Miz in them daft, baggy, bejeweled biker shorts that he used to get the faux hawk back and his daft little trilby with flames on it and stuff. That is the equivalent of, I don't know,
he had gloves as well.
He had all sorts, man. It was just gimmick on top of gimmick on top. He had
a crap Marty Skrull.
Yeah, he had that awful call and response catchphrase that didn't get over that JBL tried to beat him up for on the SmackDown card. There's so much stupid stuff that's never been revisited because WWE, I think, forgot it happened. There's this missing scene that we're going to talk about full of wrestlers that now there is actually an opportunity to just give people one night. I'm not saying you do a run, but one night pops out of this stuff.
Yeah, let's talk around the sort of Ruthless Aggression Era and wrestlers that could maybe return in 2020. Who pops into your head when I say that, Michael Sidgwick, as your life flashes before your eyes there?
When I hear the words Ruthless Aggression, I think of WCW Natural Born Thrillers and your Heidenreichs and your John Cena early versions, just your completely unseasoned muscle monsters that WWE, having monopolized the industry and killed any semblance of mainstream competition, just had to train for a few months down in some regionalized territory like OVW, bring up to the main roster, and I'm watching them thinking, you're a bit crap at this. What's happened to this thing that I used to love? But it kind of developed over the years, and you got some good workers and you got some standout performers. He's 61 years old, right? But I just love Finlay. I really love Finlay, but I don't think that's physically possible at this point in his career. So without looking at that, if only to banish I go on Squared Circle as a news source, and there's some good memes on there and some terrible takes. You know how it goes. And I just see the odd thing about, I should have done more with Carlito. And you think, you know what? He couldn't give a toss. No. But if he did want to come back and take the money, he was, for his time, a pretty engaging act.
He's a body guy now as well, isn't he?
Yes.
He got big, didn't he?
Yeah.
I'm into that.
He had that wonderful segment with Piper in Austin where he kind of held his own for his relative stature. And yeah, apparently, according to Jim Ross, who let slip on a recent Grilling JR podcast, this is absolutely fantastic, he had all the tools. He mentioned the word athleticism about 8 times in one sentence because that's what JR is want to do. But by all accounts, Carlito was just a complete natural. It came at him like that. Wrestling just clicked, but he was more interested in just going out and pulling loads of birds.
Too many apples in the Garden of Eden for that, man.
He just liked the life more than the career. So who knows if you could motivate him. On the evidence of 5-star wrestling, which has become a total meme in UK circles, I very much doubt it. But, he spat on people's faces. He had a ridiculous catchphrase. He spit on the face of people who didn't want to be cool. Surely you just wouldn't be bothered. Let alone taking a bite of an apple and then potentially drawing a confrontation.
Not just people that aren't cool, people that don't want to be cool. They're not looking to start anything in the first place.
But if you want to be cool, you're not cool. The Simpsons taught me that.
Yeah. I like the tragedy of him coming back after however many years gone is cousin and nephew gang have been there for like 10 years, twice as long, have still never got over, and he's rocks back up. Oh, that's like, nice to see you again. I'll just take their spot. Like they're like trying to drag them up from nothing to something.
You got to be careful when we consider things like this because, again, on places like Reddit and comment sections of different website articles, I read the words, bring back Shelton Benjamin for years and years and years.
Yeah.
He came back. Has he ever got a reaction? Like, seriously, even as like American Alpha 2.
Chad Gable went looking for one from him, didn't he? That was it, basically.
He never got a reaction. So we've got to be careful about what this audience, desperate for something new, wants. I don't think they want necessarily a version of the past that maybe is best left behind. Carlito, I think, is one of few remaining, like, let's be honest, alive or in decent nick performers of that era who maybe does have something to prove.
Another name.
I doubt it. I've seen 5-star wrestling.
Another name that you mentioned, that is mentioned regularly on sort of Squared Circle and wrestling forums and what have you, in the same sort of vein as Carlito, is MVP. He was the name that arguably leapt into my head first when we talked about this.
I was always very pro MVP coming back because I was of the opinion that was a lot of missed opportunities with him. It felt to me that obviously they were interested in pushing him long before he was ready for the push, and then he started to get really good at the point where they had lost all faith in him because of that first failed attempt. It happened a lot in WWE, that kind of cycle.
It happened a lot this year.
Yeah, it still happens now, doesn't it? And then I was educated to go back and look at how New Japan invented a title for him, the Intercontinental title, and I watched those matches and they stunk, and I was like, oh, you don't have it anymore, mate. Like that's I haven't seen what he's done over the last couple of years, and I'm sure the gimmick would still have a certain degree of popularity with a certain section of the fan base, but I'm not sure that the work's there. And I'm assuming kind of what you were trying to get at with Carlito as well, in relation to what we said about John Morrison, is that new stuff's got to be worthwhile. The matches have got to deliver because more than ever, the matches are there on a constant every week. So if you can't do it, you're going to fall behind. The old gimmick is only going to serve you a few weeks before you've got to show why you're there now rather than why you used to be there. I think we've seen the problem with Shelton Benjamin is every time he comes out, it's almost like, oh yeah, I forgot Shelton was on the roster. And then you have all these flashbacks to 2003 and he can't wrestle like he did in 2003. So there's such a disconnect between what he can offer now versus what he used to offer you then. And MVP for me feels like that kind of guy. He appeared on one of the Nostalgia Raw shows, and he wasn't even in gear. I think he was playing poker with the APA and Ted DiBiase, and that to me spoke about what they like, the nostalgia they held internally for him. And I worry that if he came back, he wouldn't even be treated with that much reverence from the company, let alone the fans.
A great entrance theme, though. Used to love that.
Big inflatable tunnel.
He had a great theme, a genuinely inspiring backstory that they were useless at marketing or exploiting. He was a decent character performer. He was getting very good in the ring. He seems to have lost interest now. I don't know how old he is at this point. You could give him a tag run, but what of the tag team division?
The roster's so big. Do you know what I mean? The roster's so bloated. These kind of like casual signings have never been more unnecessary unless you're just there to like help guys get good.
It's a lost generation, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Who some of the names that came to you when we talked about this?
One popped into my head because she appeared quite recently, and I still maintain that the women's division is short on super experienced, like legend-like figures that can work. We have Natalya and Mickie James, and certainly Natalya often feels like she's worn out of welcome as a character, no matter what good she might be doing. Was Michelle McCool. She had that really good Royal Rumble run in 2018, which surely must have been like politically motivated that she got the record number of eliminations. But she looked like she still had it. I'm not saying that she'd be able to go on the road and do it every single week, but again, to look at Natalya and look at Mickie James, and maybe it doesn't always appear that way on what we're watching, but the women that they work with certainly speak about how influential they are in those matches and working the house show loops with characters like that. Michelle McCool, in a limited capacity, I think offers something new but experienced and familiar to that division. And I just think that the women's division is always about bringing somebody brand new that you haven't seen before rather than looking to the past because people just assume there is no past to speak of. The Divas division had these very small glimmers of light, and Leigh Cole as an actor was one and Michelle McCool as a worker was definitely one.
I'm firmly on board with this. Sorry to interrupt. She once had a match, I think it was in 2007, opposite Melina, and it was class. Like, if you go back and watch this match, you'll scarcely believe how good it was by the standards of the time and your memories of them, and how much this generation has completely eclipsed those memories as something even worse than they were at large. They actually beat the crap out of each other, and they got bollocked for it backstage.
You shouldn't wrestle like the guys.
Yeah. A ripper of a match. It was really good. I think it was the match where Melina did the splits to come into the ring, and she just got drop kicked the hell off the apron, and they did loads of awesome, like nasty looking stuff on the barricade. They went backstage and got bollocked. for having the temerity to put on a physical and entertaining and action-packed match, because, you know, that's what the guys are there for. You're there to get your tits out and get your arse out on that ring apron. It would be nice, I think, in a nice sort of karmic sort of way, for Michelle Cool to just get a little mini run to atone for the way she was treated and how much it's an actual pro wrestler. Her experience was stymied. And one last point on that. This year we had to suffer like the lack of buzz that Becky Lynch was able to maintain post WrestleMania, because it was her job somehow in the role as Becky Two Belts to raise up Lacey Evans.
Didn't make sense, did it?
And now you've had Natalya do that on television. If you had someone like Michelle McCool, a senior head, who could do that on the undercard against someone like a Lacey Evans, or maybe a Peyton Royce, who I think might have some potential as a singles act going forward, it's Christmas, mate.
Thanks.
It's Christmas.
Thanks for that.
Then I think it's not just nice to see them return. I think, as Hamflet points out, it's necessary.
It's a really valid point now, because we've seen with the returns of, you know, Trish and Lita, that what I like about that is I'm not arguing that someone like a Michelle McCool should immediately come in and be involved in the title picture, although I probably, judging by her experience and her skills previously, I think you could argue a one-off title shot wouldn't be out of the question completely. But also, we particularly saw this with Trish, the women's division is great and obviously stacked, and the title picture is very interesting. And now you've got the women's tag team titles, of course, as well. But WWE sort of struggles a little bit when they have people like a Charlotte Flair, when you've taken her out of the title picture, and thankfully you don't resort to, well, she's going to argue over a man now like they used to. But to give them something to do, to bring in someone like a Michelle McCool, like they did with Trish Stratus, is really good to just heat someone up for a couple of months, I think.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, now that so much time's passed, did it out for Charlotte Flair's legacy or career. So again, I would just like to see not so much an attraction match on a SummerSlam card that really could have benefited from like the younger existing roster who gets like really not many opportunities. Just a veteran run that can guide someone who desperately needs it through the system.
It's kind of a cool cheat for the women's division, because outside of Trish and Lita, it's almost as if women's wrestling was only invented by Stephanie McMahon in 2015. We joke about that, but that does often feel how that is. And whereas with all the men's like comebacks and the nostalgia pops, they've mined them to sell tickets and pop ratings. They've never done that in the women's division ever, because it's been their secret shame for such a long time. The Bellas almost are seen as like the elder stateswomen of the division just because they happened to be there before. Like Alicia Fox was another one. So actually going to the well for the good talent that were sort of like floating around in a time, as Cedric points out, where they weren't rewarded for it. It'd just be nice to see general that philosophy. You know, you name Melina, and I was thinking of like Layla as well. There are more than just one or two names there. There's not many more, but there's one or two more that could like still absolutely serve a purpose.
Whenever we talk about the Ruthless Aggression Era, and certainly whenever we talk about wrestlers returning to WWE, there's a name that always pops up, which is problematic because of the way that he left WWE, and we all just assumed that he was done. And yet, there's still a hope, certainly within the WhatCulture office, that Edge may return.
I thought you were going to say Muhammad Hassan. That's my least favourite internet opinion. God, they wasted him.
He's going to win the title. He's going to win the title. Thanks a lot.
What did he do? What did he do afterwards?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, that's a diversion. I'm genuinely scared there.
But with Edge, you know, there's been speculation about him returning for a sort of crown jewel show or whatever, and there's concerns obviously around the reason why he left. But then he came back and speared Elias recently, and people started getting excited about that. Is that at all feasible that he could return?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think he's physically able, nor would he want to go a kind of full schedule. He's a guy more in line with these nostalgia pops that because he's never had that match, that's got value. That's got WrestleMania value or SummerSlam or wherever they're in Toronto, wherever they want to deploy that. I'm all for that. But I just think and I understand why his fans will probably feel a little bit robbed of maybe the last 5 years of his career. But I don't even think he would want a run, as it were. I think he would want to test himself in a match. And then if there's a bit more engine in the tank, you'd have something like a Sting situation. Obviously, without Sting getting injured against Seth, he probably saw himself having maybe 5 or 10 decent matches with WWE just to do that. Edge getting a run through the guys he retired just before they all came through. I'm sure he'd love to do it, and it'd look great on posters and at shows. But that's it. I don't think there's anything longer term than that.
And for the fans, it was so sudden. It was like we didn't get the time to appreciate. Oh, this is his last match. It was like that was my last match because doctors have told me you're done, sort of thing.
Yeah, Edge for me, I've got so much fondness for him because what I alluded to earlier, that entire generation just collectively, profoundly failing to smash through that glass ceiling. Edge did it. After being stigmatized almost as like a tag team guy who could do stunt matches.
Triple H still considers him doesn't consider him a tippy-toppy guy, does he?
Prick. He smashed that glass ceiling, was incredibly entertaining in a time when the writing wasn't calibrated to make him entertaining. He made himself a star, loved him so much. But again, the whole shadow of Saudi Arabia just has completely muted any of my enthusiasm for nostalgia pops, because what we're going to see, like a live hand-holding celebration in Riyadh, not for me. I would love to see him just say, no, I always felt he did himself right, Edge. He was just like, he looked after himself. He didn't toady up to anyone. He could have had that Triple H rivalry, but I think he was very savvy and brave to just politically remove himself from that situation. I think he was always in it for the right reasons. He never wanted, even if he didn't suffer that neck injury, to go out in such a way that he was a shadow of his former self. I would love to see him, if he was capable, have one last match specifically at WrestleMania.
I agree.
Nowhere near Saudi Arabia. And if the doctors clear him, I trust the doctors. The lessons of Daniel Bryan and all the moralizing that went on about, like, from just armchair surgeons and urologists thinking, oh, is it the best thing for him? Just, I'm not a doctor. It's like saying, vaccines are bad. No, they're not. And you have no scientific basis for this. So if there's clear him, he's cleared. That's my interpretation of things.
Finally, we can't mention the Ruthless Aggression Era without John Cena. Now, he's obviously gone off and done Hollywood, and there's always speculation about him returning for a Saudi Arabia show or for a Big Four show, perhaps. We reported recently that he's doing another movie, of course. But could you see him making some sort of WWE return in 2020?
Again, only on a very limited sort of basis, if even at all. He's what once appeared like it was going to be 3 or 4 matches a year has quickly become 3 or 4 appearances a year, which could quickly become 1 appearance a year, which could become none until he comes back for a huge money program. Ironically, following the exact pattern of The Rock, the man he was derided in storyline for doing, because he's seen another way. I could see it going that way for Cena. I welcome him generally. He's actually worse in storylines than outside of them, because ask Baron Corbin and ask Elias how great it was to get the rub from John Cena versus just doing one-off segments with guys where it can be quite entertaining, where he can just mess around a little bit and be a genuinely welcome and warm presence back, a reminder of the bits of him that you genuinely liked before you have time to get sick of him. Match-wise, I don't think he's got it anymore, truthfully. And I think he probably knows that. Otherwise, we would have seen something more special with The Undertaker. He would have backed himself to get a good match out of The Undertaker instead of what we saw at that WrestleMania. So for him and for me, no, I'm okay with the exact amount of John Cena we get now.
If I never see John Cena wrestle in the squared circle ever again, I'll die a happy man. That's all I've got to say on that.
Well, let us know your thoughts on wrestlers you'd like to see return in 2020, particularly from the Ruthless Aggression Era, in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there. You can follow all 3 of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
M. Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all, as I said, at What Culture WWE. This has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.